Okay, all praise, glory, and honor is most certainly due to the Most High, the God of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and peace to you in the name of Jesus. Count it truly a blessing each and every single time that I can come forward to preach the word of God, and you'll count it as a light thing to do so. And what I want to do right now is answer a question that a brother had. And this is a third part of a three-part question that he had. And the question is as follows. Do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant to be a covenant, or just simply an agreement in court establish this covenant? Again, I'm gonna read the question again and I'll get right into answering it. Do you need to sleep together for a covenant? Do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant to be a covenant, or just simply an agreement in court establish this covenant? Okay. Peace to you, Brother Tevion. It's good to see you there, brother. Hope you're doing well. Peace to you, sister. Shalom. Peace to you. Well, the first thing we need to find out is, or deal with, the first thing we need to deal with is the word covenant. What is a covenant? Okay. A covenant simply is a voluntary acceptance between two parties of specific terms. When two parties come together and agree on certain terms, oftentimes this is reciprocal, then you have a covenant. Okay, so let's look at an example of someone entering into a covenant. Peace to you. Peace to everybody that's listening. I'm in Exodus, the 19th chapter. Here, and the relationship, notice, well, actually, before we read that, in Exodus, let's go to the New Testament, or the New Covenant. Okay, and let's read the writings of Paul. And I'm going to read Ephesians, the 5th chapter, and I'm going to pick it up in the 22nd verse. Ephesians 5 and verse 22. It reads as follows. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Okay, so when you look at when you look at the relationship between a man and a woman, or a man and his wife, this relationship can be likened, or should be likened, to the relationship between the Messiah and the church. Again, it says, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Okay, so I want to put that in perspective, because when we read about the covenant that was made in Exodus, the 19th chapter, it's the same premise or same notion. Exodus, the 19th chapter, and I'm going to pick it up at verse 5. Exodus, the 19th chapter and verse 5. Again, here we see an example of the covenant. When you see the children of Israel, the church, coming into a covenant with God. And we understand that that was Christ who they were dealing with before he was manifested in the flesh. Exodus, the 19th chapter and verse 5 reads as follows. Now, therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, again, my agreement, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. See, this is a reciprocal relationship. He brought terms before them, and they had to accept, which makes it voluntary. I'm going to keep reading. And it says in verse 6, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel. Moses was the mediator of the covenant. Okay, so what happened was God gave him the terms of the covenant, and he took those terms and he presented them before the people, and they had to agree to those terms. And the terms were this: hey, if you're obedient unto me, I'll uphold you above all nations. You'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. He said, he says, keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. All you had to do was be obedient. Okay. Now, verse 7. And Moses came and called for the elders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded him. Verse 8. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses returned the words of the people unto the Lord. So what the people said, he brought it back unto the Lord. So now, again, voluntary. It was voluntary. So again, so what is a covenant? A covenant is an agreement of terms between two, voluntary agreement of terms between several parties, more than one party. Okay, and that's what happened here. So now it's this. The terms of the covenant are presented here. Now you go to Exodus. If we go to Exodus, the 24th chapter, we can read where they actually go into the covenant. Exodus, the 24th chapter, and verse 6. It says, and Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the book of the covenant and read in the audience of the people. So he's reading the terms of the covenant. And then it says, and they said, all that the Lord has said, will we do and be obedient. So now this is a blood covenant. So now they come under the blood. It says, and Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant, which is which the Lord have made with you concerning all these words. So that's an example of a covenant. So a covenant is simply that. So you could have an agreement of marriage and be considered married without actual sexual intercourse. Now let's go to Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter, because there's a misconception that many people have concerning marriage and sexual intercourse. The misconception that is put forth by quite a few people is that sex constitutes marriage. In other words, in order to be married, all you have to do is have sex. I even heard that that notion early on, coming into the knowledge of the truth. Someone tell me, well, any woman that you were to lay with is your wife. That is not true. However, they misread what I'm going to read here in Deuteronomy to substantiate that point. So let's go read it. Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter. Let's see. Let's go to Exodus, excuse me. Exodus, the 22nd chapter. You can read it in several places, but Exodus, the 22nd chapter, it says in verse 16, and if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, meaning she's not supposed to be married to another man, okay, or what they would call today, likened to in the Western world, to be engaged. It says, and if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. People will come here to substantiate the notion that sex constitutes marriage, but that's not what's being said here. Let's read it again. And if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, meaning she is not to be married to another man, there's no agreement there, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. Now, what does it mean, endow her? First of all, let's be clear what we're talking about here. This is the dowry of virgins that you were to give to a father. Because you did not go through the proper means. The proper means would be to go to the father first. They had the system of dowry. You would pay the dowry, and that would be part of the terms of the agreement for the woman to be married. We'll find out that marriage is voluntary, and then you would consummate the marriage. But because you went out of order, now you have to go take the steps to make the woman your wife. Again, and if a man entice a maid that is not betrothed, meaning this is a voluntary sexual encounter, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her to be his wife. Verse 17. This is so if you keep reading, you can understand that this is the sex alone does not constitute marriage. If her father utterly refused to give her unto him. So why don't they, why don't they read that? If you read this, you understand that, wait a minute, you actually have to go through this different process to make her your wife. If her father utterly refused to give her unto him, he shall pay money according to the dowry of virgins. Okay, so you had to pay a fine. Okay, let's go to another place in the Old Testament. And let's pick it up. Let's pick up another part of this question. Because the question was, do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant to be a covenant, or simply an agreement in court establish this covenant? See, peace to you, Brother Leo and Brother Will. It's good to see you both there. And everybody that's listening, peace to you. One thing about it is, again, like I say often, we are applying Western standards to Hebraic culture, a book that comes out of the East scriptures of an Eastern people. Okay, and we're applying it. See, first of all, you don't need a court to be married. Okay. Secondly, when you look at Torah, being betrothed carries and violating that covenant. Let's say a woman is betrothed to a man and she lays with a different man. Now she haven't laid with that one yet. In the Western world, if you engage, you lay with somebody else, the engagement might be off. There's no penalty. There's no penalty for anything, really. Until you talk about getting a divorce, and then you have some monetary penalty. But there's really nothing. At the most, somebody might say, get a ring back. A judge might say, get a ring back. Okay, if you decide not to marry the man for whatever reason. But it's a capital crime when a woman who is betrothed to a man would deal with another man. So I'm pointing that out because it's treated the same way as adultery. Okay, even though you haven't consummated a marriage with sex. See, so we have to really change the way in which we think about marriage, because the Torah is telling us something different than what the Western European standards, traditions, and culture is telling us. This is Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter. And let's pick it up at verse, let's see. I'm going to pick it up at verse. Actually, yeah, let's pick it up. Actually, before we do that, and let's get back into, I want to get back into when you talk about the terms of the covenant. This is Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter, and then we'll read the next part. Let's take a few steps back. Deuteronomy, the 22nd chapter, verse 13. It says, if any man take a wife and go in unto her and hate her, and give occasions of speech against her, and bring up an evil name upon her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I found her not a maid. So the first thing is, when you think about marriage from Hebraic culture, if the woman didn't have a husband already and was divorced, that woman was supposed to be a virgin. And so now, when you look at this situation, the woman was not a virgin, which was some terms of the covenant that was made. It's just like it's like if you acquire something from someone and then you find out it's not what you thought it was or what they claimed it to be. See, this man went into the agreement thinking he would be marrying a virgin, and come to find out she wasn't a virgin. So now you can get, if you do that in today's court in the Western world, you agree to give something, and then somebody gets home and it's not what you said it was. You violate the terms of the agreement, you can be sued. Okay? So now here it says, then shall the father of the damsel and her mother take and bring the tokens of the damsel's virginity unto the elders of the city of the gate. What were the tokens of virginity? The tokens of virginity were the sheet that was laid under their encounter when the hymen was broken, and more than likely blood will flow on that, and that would be saved as a token or evidence of her purity up until that time of marriage. Okay, then it says, and the damsel's father shall say unto the elders, I gave my daughter into this man to wife, and he hated her. And lo, he had given occasions of speech against her. So he said some things about her. She wasn't pure up until that point. She's out there playing the whore. But he says, I found not thy daughter maid, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity. But here's the proof. So it says, and they shall spread the cloth before the elders of the city, and the elders of the city shall take that man and chastise him. And then you have a fine. Here's the fine. And they shall immerse him in 100 shekels of silver, and give them unto the father of the damsel, because he have brought up an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife. He may not put her away all his days. So that was his wife. He had to care for her. Nothing he could do. Okay. But if this thing be true, and the tokens of virginity be not found for the damsel, meaning if the woman was married, and the man that she married in their first encounter, he finds out that she's not a virgin. And he said, wait a minute, I was under the impression that I was marrying a virgin. It says, then they shall bring out the damsel to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die, because she had wrought folly in Israel to play the whore in her father's house. So shalt thou put evil away from among you. One thing about this is that when we're looking at marriage again, a woman is supposed to come in as a virgin. That's something you don't find that today, but that's what's supposed to be according to Torah. Now let's skip down a little bit, because as I said earlier, even when you talk about how marriage is looked upon, when there's an agreement to even be married, it's seen or it's treated as if the same as one that has consummated the marriage, even if they haven't. You understand? Let's go to verse 23. Well, verse 22, it says, if a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. The adulterer and the adulteress. So what's adultery? Adultery for a man is when a man is laying with another man's wife. Adultery for a woman is laying with any man that is not her husband. I'm going to say that again, because that's a distinction. Anytime a man is laying with another man's wife, he is an adulterer. Anytime a woman is laying with a man that is not her husband, and she's married, we're talking about married, she is dealing in adultery. Okay? Verse 23. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband. So it says, the damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in the city and lie with her. So she's supposed to be married to somebody else. They haven't consummated that marriage yet. But a man lays with her. It says, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. So it's just like it's treated the same as adultery. I'm just putting this out there so we can understand how we should view the institution of marriage. Because how it's being viewed from a Western perspective is totally different. It says the damsel, because she cried. So it says in verse 24 at the very beginning, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he had humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. It said because you humbled his neighbor's wife, even though they had not consummated that marriage. And again, peace to everybody that's listening. They had not consummated that marriage, but both of them were killed. Okay. Now let's see an example of that. Let's go to Matthew, the 1st chapter. Here we see an example of someone betrothed with a marriage that had not been, or not been consummated. This is an example of Mary and Joseph, or Joseph and Miriam. This is Matthew, the 1st chapter, and verse 18. It says, now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise, when as his mother Mary was espoused or betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, before they consummated the marriage, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost. Now we understand that this was not his literal seed, because it says this, verse 19, then Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not willing to make her a public example, was minded to put her away privately. So again, it's treated just as if they had consummated the marriage. He was going to put her away, but if he would have made it known, she would have been stoned. Okay, just like when they caught the woman in adultery and they brought her to the Messiah, he said, we have caught this woman in the very act of adultery. The law says stone, or what sayest thou? But the problem was, the reason why I say he is without sin, let him cast the first stone. First of all, they were dealing in unrighteous judgment. First of all, they were probably dealing in that's why they dropped their stones. They started thinking about the things that they had done and their own unrighteousness, but also the fact that they didn't bring the man. If you caught her in the very act of adultery, you should know who the man is. The law says the adulterer and the adulteress should be stoned. Okay? So again, the question was, do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant to be a covenant, or simply an agreement and court establishes covenant? Now, again, a covenant is a voluntary agreement of terms between parties. Okay? So you don't need to go to court to have a marriage. I'm gonna say that again. You don't need to go to court to have a marriage. I'm talking biblically. Let's look at an example of this. Let's go to Genesis, the 24th chapter. Again, peace to you. Peace to everybody that's listening. It's good to see you there. Genesis, the 24th chapter. Because you don't need a court. But people, again, will say, well, all you need is sex to be married. No, that's not accurate. That is not accurate. Because if that is the case, then when the Bible says, thou shalt not prostitute thy daughter to cause her to be a harlot, that would mean that she's married to all those men that she's prostituting herself to. That's not the case. If sex is married, then when it says man shall not lie with man as he lied with woman, it is abomination, then that would mean they're married. And we know that's not marriage. So sex in and of itself doesn't constitute marriage. Okay, let's go to Genesis, the 24th chapter. We want to pick it up at verse 67, because, again, people who would put forth the notion that it is only sex that constitutes marriage would read this. But if you read it in context, which we're going to read it first, then we'll go back and read into it. We can understand that you have the elements of a covenant, voluntary terms, all that. This is Genesis, the 24th chapter, and no court, but Genesis, the 24th chapter, verse 67. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So some would say, see, all he had was sex, and that brought forth the marriage. No, that's actually not true. Let's go back to the beginning of this chapter, and we'll find out that you have the elements of a covenant. This is Genesis, the 24th chapter, and verse 1. It says, and Abraham was old and well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said unto his eldest servant of his house, that ruled over all that he had, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and I will make thee swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that thou shalt not take a wife unto my son of the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. So he didn't want his son to marry a Canaanite woman. So it says, but in verse 4, but thou shalt go unto my country, into my kindred, and take a wife unto my son Isaac. Okay, so he's telling him he's going to take a wife from among his own people. Now let's skip down to verse 15. So he sends his servant out. Okay, now his servant, he prays unto the Lord that he would be able to find him, and his prayers answered. Verse 15. And it came to pass before he had done speaking that, behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, and it said a virgin, neither had any man known her. And she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. Okay, so he was, he said the first one, the one that brings me help with these camels, that provides something for these camels, make it known. He's looking for a sign. And here comes Rebekah, who is a virgin. Okay, now let's skip down to verse 22, because she provides for him and even brings him to their house. And then notice what happens here. But it says, and it came to pass as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekel weights of gold. Okay, so now you have a type of dowry giver. So you have one sent out sent out to find a wife. Once he finds a prospective wife, he gives her a type of dowry. Now let's pick it up at verse 23. It says, and he said, whose daughter art thou? Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? And she said unto him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. Now that's what he was looking for. That's again what we read. He said in verse 10. Actually, we didn't verse 4 it says, but thou shalt go unto my country and to my kindred and take a wife unto my son Isaac. Okay. Now, so just so we know where he went, verse 10, and the servant took 10 camels and the camels of his master and departed for all the goods of his master were in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia unto the city of Nahor. Okay, so that's where he was from. But now let's skip down to verse 24. It says, in verse 24, and she said unto him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, which she bare unto Nahor. 25, she said moreover unto him, we have both straw and provender enough and room to lodge in. And the man bowed down his head and worshiped the Lord. And he said, but blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who hath not left destitute my master of his mercy and his truth. I being in the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren. And the damsel ran and told them of her mother's house these things. Okay, so now she goes and tells her people what just happened. Now let's skip down and let's read here, verse 29. And Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban, and Laban ran out unto the man unto the well. And it came to pass when he saw the earring and bracelets upon his sister's hands, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, thus spake the man unto me, that he came unto the man, and behold, he stood by the camels at the well. Okay, now let's skip down a little bit, because he tells them what his mission was. Okay, now let's skip down to verse 57, verse 55, because I said it has to be voluntary. Okay. So it says, and her brother and her mother said, let the damsel abide with us a few days, at the least 10. After that, she shall go. So he's like, listen, this is my mission. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to find a bride for Isaac. This is the one. Rebekah is the one. And they said, well, let us stay. And he said unto them, hinder me not. He said, don't hinder me, seeing the Lord have prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. He said, I'm not trying to wait 10 days. And listen to what they said. And they said, we will call the damsel and inquire at her mouth. So let's find out what she wants to do. Verse 58. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, wilt thou go with this man? And she said, I will go. So now you have a you have a marriage here. This is his wife. She's agreed to be his wife. Okay? She's agreed, a dowry's been paid. She's agreed to be his wife. So you don't even have you don't read about here a wedding feast. You don't read about here them going down to the courthouse, but there's a marriage. It's already agreed upon. Because that's what a covenant is, simply put, in agreement. So it says in verse 59, and they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant and his men. Again, you know, that's why you will hear the term people living as man and wife. You can have an agreement without a piece of paper from the courthouse. That doesn't mean that piece of paper is not valid. What I'm saying is you don't need that for a marriage. That is relatively new. Now you have ketubas, you had different, different societies did different things. Peace to you, brothers. Good to see you there, brother Isaiah. But thank you, brother Tavion. I appreciate it, and brother Willie, appreciate it. But it's about the agreement and are you going to uphold the terms of the agreement? And even when you get a license from the state, you're actually putting them into your midst. So you have an agreement, and now they are in it. So that could complicate things. But it says, and they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, thou art our sister. Be thou the mother of thousands of millions, and let thy seed possess the gate of those which hate them. And Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. And Isaac came from the way of the well, Laharoy, for he dwelt in the south country. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, he lifted off the camel. For she had said unto the servant, what man is this that walketh in the field to meet us? And the servant had said, it is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother's Sarah's tent, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So we should understand again that this. So when you read, he took in a wife, and he took her into his tent, right? But you must take into consideration, or you should take into consideration, all the things that happened prior. So do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant to be a covenant? No, because the covenant is the agreement of marriage. You can be married and not have consummated the marriage. Even that is a blood covenant. Because we talk about the tokens of virginity. That just consummates the marriage. But the marriage exists already when you agree to the terms. So those terms were agreed with. There was no court. So do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant? No, you don't. You can have a marriage and there actually be no sex involved or had not consummated it yet. It's still a marriage. Y'all still married. Let's see. So it says, do you need to sleep together? Do you need to sleep together for a marriage covenant to be a covenant, or just simply an agreement in court establishes covenant? Also, you don't necessarily need to go to court to have a marriage. That's something that is, again, relatively new, particularly here in the Western world, that you would have the court, the state involved in marriage. Prior to that, you would have clans, they would make arrangements, they would make agreements or covenants between one another. You might have people, priests and so forth, who were over that, but then the concern of miscegenation brings the state into it, which is what you have today, and that's something that's a carryover, and so that's an extra party involved taking authority over your marriage. You see that particularly when you try to dissolve a marriage. So that, I just wanted to answer that question. With that being said, brothers and sisters, it's good to see everybody. I hope you're doing well. I want to remind you that we live stream every Sabbath, which is Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. What else? We also have Bible study every Friday night on Zoom. If you look at the description of the videos, you'll see information on how to take part in that Bible study. Also, if you've been edified through the ministry and would like to leave a donation, you can do so on our website, www.israelteach.org. Again, www.israelteach.org. We also live stream through our website. And let me say this: if there's an issue with let's say there's an issue with YouTube or something like that, we have live streaming on our website, www.israelteach.org. So at any time that, let's say there's an issue with streaming, say it's buffering or something, not the lessons I do during the week, but on the Sabbath, we live stream in two places. Again, we live stream right here on the Israel Teach YouTube channel, as well as on our website, www.israelteach.org. So if you would like to, watch in either one of those places, you can do so. All praise to the Most High, bro. Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate you, brothers. You're very helpful. I appreciate it. Books I've written that are available: Into Egypt Begin with Ships, The Pagan Origins of Christian Holidays, Hair Like Wool, Feet Like Burned Brass, Killing Black Innocents, For Then Shall Be Great Tribulation, and In Defense of Biblical Polygyny. All those books are available at Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles, and other places where books are sold. All praise to the Most High. Again, I appreciate you, brothers. Brothers Isaiah, Willie, Brother Lee, I appreciate you. Great, Tedion, appreciate you, brothers. And with that, so is my prayer that you were edified.